In the wake of a 26-10 defeat to the Stormers, Nick, Jock, Jash, and I discuss the game itself, give our opinions on the R360 selection discussions, just have a look at what Dave Redden has said in the last week. Bloody hell, that needs some discussing. And preview a first home game of the season. Stay tuned. Good evening, ladies and gents. I'm your host, Zach. I'm joined by Nick as a special returning guest this time around. How you been?
Yeah, good, thank you.
And I'm joined by Jack, and Josh, as always. Guess how you boys doing?
Good, mate. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Let's get straight into it then. No Ospreys specific news this week. Nothing newsworthy at least. The big news of the week is naturally that Dave Redden has been or was on Scrum 5 Live Pod last Thursday, of which he was discussing his appointment and his plans for the game. The big mention or the big thing that's come up out of it is that he has confidently said that an anglo-welsh league is not happening. What do you boys think about it? Jack, I know you're pretty heated about the topic.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of a lot of it. I think the truth is that while they have shares in the URC and they're in the URC, they're not going to come out and say, oh yeah, we are actively in talks with the English Premiership and the RFU to have regions in that league, because you wouldn't come out and say that, would you? I find it hard to believe that in a time where we're discussing changes in Welsh rugby and they're discussing such drastic changes in Welsh rugby and funding and so on, that wouldn't have been discussed at some point. I think that, it wouldn't surprise me if behind the scenes these conversations are going on. And it also wouldn't surprise me that if they are talking about it, some of the decisions that they make involving the regions are influenced by that, if it's something they want to be in. So that's kind of my take on it. I think that is basically it. I would say. Don't know if you boys got anything to add.
Yeah, I personally agree. I think it's unlikely, even if we were going to look to join an Anglo-Welsh league, that Dave Redden would say, as you say, because we're already stakeholders in the URC, so we have to show interest in the league we're already a part of. And at the same time, even if it wasn't feasible, from lengthy discussions on our group chat with Lee, there are all sorts of obstacles in the way, and that can't necessarily be condensed by Dave Redden in a 5-minute interview where he probably wants the Anglo-Welsh question to be a 30-second, no, it's not happening, we can't make it work, basically. In an ideal world, from my perspective, I'd love us to be part of an Anglo-Welsh league. I think in terms of getting more travelling support, reducing our travel costs. I think when Glasgow got to the URC final in South Africa a few years ago, it was costing them 6-figure sums. I can't remember the exact figures, but it was close to 200k to $250,000 to make the final and make that work. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a sustainable way to run a league where you're having to fork out that kind of cash when all rugby clubs are broke, to make a final and to have that be your aspiration. Whereas if you're in the Prem, obviously it'd be Twickenham, it'd be nowhere near that sort of cost. But whether it'd be feasible, there's obviously loads of other factors to it. In terms of RFU paying X amount for player release, the WRU would then have to fit the bill for that. We'd then have to pay to join the Premiership, and that would be loads of upfront costs. And yeah, I think there are some really good points made on the main rap pod. So yeah, I definitely recommend listeners, if you haven't listened to it yet, definitely go across there and listen to it. And I think Nick made a really good point, and had a really good analogy for it as well. But essentially the point is, if as much as we may want it, if they don't want it, it's not on the table. And you need two parties to be interested for it to make it work. And if they're only interested in two teams and we're running with 3 or 4, it's not going to work. So it is off the table.
What I find interesting about it is that from what I understand, is that so TNT with the rights to the Premiership are very interested in having more games. They want more games, and so that's something that's very, because obviously you've lost Worcesters, you've lost London Irish, you've lost Wasps. They want to make up for the lost revenue in terms of viewing figures for that. So these are things that all kind of play into this idea that there is potential there. But as you said, that there are a lot of obstacles in that area. The one thing I took from the group chat was that your dog's a Gloucester fan. Yeah, right. My phone was going off, and I was in a meeting. I was trying to glance over it, and all I could get out of it was your dog's a Gloucester fan.
Yeah, unfortunately, Nala's born in Hereford, so she's unfortunately she's a Gloucester fan, and I haven't managed to quite convince her to come over to the Ospreys. I think if she gets a good look at Derry Lake's Tash, she might might change her mind.
I don't know. I'd personally run away.
What about you, Zach? What's your view? Obviously, it'd be much easier for you to go and watch games if they had a couple of games down in London.
Oh, naturally. I mean, I think I've gone to every Ospreys game in the UK, well, in England for the last couple of years, which has been a great thing. It'd be something I'd look to do more whenever we do play in Europe, but I don't know if it's necessarily sustainable. I think there's a lot of positives regarding sort of fan transport and being able to go see the games in the away fan, which is an experience that, at least when we have travelled to see anglo-welsh derbies, the Ospreys typically travel the best of all the Welsh regions, just from what I've seen, at least. Very biased intake, I know. Most of the time, though, it just feels unsustainable. I feel like it'll be a really big thing for sort of 2 years, and then after that, it'll just sort of start dropping off, so that you're not really getting the benefit of it anymore.
And for me as well, obviously I travel quite a lot when I come down to watch games, the Osprey games at home. Sale is just over an hour and a half away. And if, in fairness, I'd probably go and watch all the Welsh teams if they didn't clash with an Osprey game, if they were playing in Sale. And 3 of those 4 teams, if there was all 4, I'd support. Obviously, one team I definitely wouldn't.
Scab. It feels, I don't know, I don't think it'd be sustainable long term, especially given the Prem at the moment is not a sustainable business model at all.
No.
Like the amount of teams that have gone under in the Prem in the last 5 years is exorbitant. In English rugby alone, you're sort of looking at Jersey, Wasps, Worcester, Newcastle would have gone under if it wasn't for Red Bull coming in and saving the day.
Yeah.
I don't think that's sustainable for any of the Welsh sides who don't have that good attendance figures. Like you look at Worcester are averaging more people at their games than we were. And is that sustainable in the English league? The URC, for all its complaints, is at least keeping clubs alive. You don't hear there's no financial troubles in South Africa, there's no financial troubles in Italy, no financial troubles in Scotland, particularly. It's all, the clubs are all still going pretty comfortably. And I think given the URC is still on the up, it's still growing season on season, viewing figures getting bigger, sponsorship with that will be getting bigger and bigger as well. It's probably just worth sticking it out long term.
And another thing to add there, as I said on the pod, and the only time, thank you for making that, Josh, for saying I made a good point. It was probably the one and only one I've ever made, but I'll take that. Is that it's a good experience for our players, isn't it? To play in these different environments against some of the best players in the world, particularly in Ireland and South Africa. And it's the conditions in South Africa are so different to anything you would experience in the UK or Ireland.
Yeah, I do agree with those points, and I think come back just quickly to Zach's point in terms of the English league not being sustainable. I'd potentially say we just run slightly differently in terms of the English clubs are less reliant on RFU funding, whereas without WRU funding, which is for our players, but we would all all the Welsh teams wouldn't be sustainable based on their revenue streams, and the amount of competition income per region we get from the URC is roughly about 2 million, looking at the WRU account. So that's nothing really. And then without us having our benefactors putting up 2 million a year, we also wouldn't survive as a region. So I'd say potentially we're just as unsustainable. We've just got the WRU propping us up, plus our benefactors propping us up. And yeah, I'd say I'd also agree with next point in terms of the standard in the URC is definitely higher. If you look at the teams, I'd 100% agree with that. But when we're fighting in the lower half of the table with no feasibility of being able to win it, I prefer us to be in a salary capped league where we could potentially compete and get to playoffs and be in a reasonable chance of winning those games. Whereas at the moment, I feel like we're playing in a league where we're losing more often than we're winning. And then we're going into a Welsh environment with a load of players who have lost more than they've won. And it makes it quite difficult then to know how to close out tight games because we haven't been doing it in the league week in, week out, if that makes sense. But then, you know, I do understand the other side of it where the Prem teams haven't been competitive in Europe since Saracens breached the salary cap, simply because the league isn't as high a standard as our league. And when they then go into European games, they get hammered by the French sides, they get hammered by the Irish sides, or they get hammered by the South African sides. So, yeah, I definitely agree we're definitely in a high standard league, but I'd have just liked us to be a little bit more competitive in the league we're in an ideal world. Yeah, that's what I'd say to that.
Well, how do you lads then think it's, you know, with that in mind, do you think there's any movement for the WRU from his statements around, you know, for a move away from the 2 model?
I'd say so. I got the feeling that in the interviews he's given, he's basically said that players, fans, the majority of players, majority of fans are against the WRU's preferred kind of optimal choice. What's interesting in the interviews is he does go on to say though that everyone wants change. And I think he was using an analogy to do with, you know, painkillers, and if you've got a headache and it says take 2 painkillers and you take 1 and you've still got a headache, then don't be surprised. I don't like saying it, but I think what it's leading up to is the idea of having 3 regions or 3. Yeah, I think that might be the model they're going to go with in the end, which throws up all kinds of questions again around the leagues, because the URC apparently said, well, they would rather have either 4 teams or 2 teams. 3 teams is their least preferred option. And then they said, well, you know, we have, I think it's the Cheetahs have been mooted as a team that could be included, or there's an American franchise they think they could have in, but that increases the travel costs. So whatever the WRU do next, I think also influences their position in the URC and the league that they're in, because, you know, the URC, as Dave Redden said in his interviews, are one of the key stakeholders they have to talk to. And so, yeah, I get the distinct sense that they are gearing us all up to be like, well, we didn't go with the 2, but we went with 3 instead because we listened. See, because we listened.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't. How that looks is anybody's guess from there.
We could start our own prediction league in this, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Teams going under. So. I'd rather not.
I know, it was only a joke.
Look, we got close to the line last week when Josh said he liked watching Sam Costello getting smashed. I don't want to start taking this for guessing which teams are going.
No,
I think my worry is and I'm purely speculating here, but if I was to put money on it, I'd say one of the West teams will go if they go down to 3. Is what is my gut, because I just think when the Dragons have signed up to the PRA, I think they got David Buttress, who's very adamant they're going to stay. They're the only ones who own their own stadium outright. I know the Scarlets lease it off. They're the main leaseholder of the council. But yeah, I feel like you don't get rid of Dragons. And also, I think Di Flanagan did make a good point that we're already losing talent to England, and getting rid of your most easterly region could mean that all the clubs, there's Monmouthshire and Gwent, the area that I kind of come from a little bit, has the highest density of clubs. And if you're losing a lot of that talent across the border to Bristol, like we kind of are already a little bit, and Gloucester, that is a bit of a worry. So I feel like it'd be one of the Western clubs either merge or potentially lose one of them. That'd be my only concern if we go down to 3.
The Gloucester fans in.
Yeah, I was going to say.
She is. They're both.
I think this is a bigger chat than maybe we have time for this week, especially about which club is going and how it looked like it might be something to circle back around to another time. The other big piece of news coming out of this week, which is equally funny to talk about, is the R360 has had the consortium league based in Dubai has had a big update in that any players who decide to go play for it next season have been told by all the major unions that they won't be eligible for selection. The initial statement did not all get signed by the WRU, but they have gone since to say, because they don't know their own selection policy at the moment, but any Welsh player who goes and plays in the R360 won't be eligible to play for Wales. Do you boys think this is the right way to go, or do we think that this is a hindrance in the term of rugby at this point?
I don't see any of the players actually signing up to the league anyway. It's so speculative. It's like, oh, we'll offer you a contract. Like, say, like there was all that talk about Jack Morgan going, right? Like, if he doesn't go, he's going to sign for because of all the upheaval in Welsh rugby. But like, there's no guarantee this league's going to work. There's no guarantee the games are going to take place. It's a completely new league, completely new construct. Why would you sign a contract and then all of a sudden, like, the league doesn't exist and you have no idea what your rights are? And I don't see it happening. And based on the statements put out about players not being allowed to play and so on, again, like, loads of questions come up. So, for instance, if the WRU get rid of their cap rule and they say players can play anywhere, and then they turn around and say, well, yeah, but if you join this breakaway league, you can't play with us. Like, that leads... I can't see that sticking, and I can't see that sticking on loads of points because it doesn't make any sense. So I can understand why they probably didn't give a strong worded statement about it, but even so, I think it was in a podcast a long time ago. I think it was the rugby pod, Andy Good, saying one of the people involved is the biggest shyster he knows, and if Andy Good's calling someone a shyster, then that's not a good place to be. So yeah, I have no idea what to make of this league, but I don't see a mass exodus of players to a made up league without any kind of guarantee of it being a success anyway.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think for me, if they're looking to create this big league with all the big stars, unfortunately at the moment that's not going to contain a lot of Welsh players. And if it does contain a lot of Welsh players, then it probably isn't the league that they've sold it to be, and it probably isn't going to generate the income because and other than Jack Morgan and potentially Lake, the rest of them just aren't big names at the moment. None of them, we had 2 boys on the Lions tour, Thomas Williams potentially as well, but none of them were on the Lions tours. You're going to want a lot of South African players. You're going to want a lot of New Zealanders, a few Australians, a lot of English. Probably, 10 years ago, probably would have wanted a lot of Welsh in that league. Probably right now, a lot of the Welsh names probably aren't going to be the standout ones, are they?
I'm going to put just one name to counter that. I think there's been one. It wouldn't surprise me if one player specific type signs on really early, being Lewis Rees-Zammit. I just see it happening.
That would not surprise me, to be fair. And he would be a good poster boy for one of the teams, to be fair. He would be a good shout.
He just screams. He's so marketable and he just screams like R360. I don't know why.
Yeah. I think a lot of players have signed a statement of intent in terms of, if this league was to go ahead, would you be interested in joining? And I think a lot of players have said, yeah, well, if you're going to pay me X £100,000 for me to play X number of weeks of rugby, then yes, I would be interested. But I don't think anyone will have really signed any sort of commitment past that, just to say, yeah, I would be interested if this league was to go ahead. But the amount of money they're going to need to get this league off the ground, paying squads of 30, and they're going to be the biggest stars, there's going to be hundreds of thousands per player. I don't know. It doesn't really. It feels like it's going to be another version of the Japanese league where you can got a handful of stars with a handful of unknown local players, and it's going to have this generate the same level of interest. That's just my take on it.
Where are they going to play? Because like I know there's this idea that it's going to be like the sevens and it's going to be great, but like the sevens, like no one's really there for the rugby as far as I can work out. They're there for the piss up.
I can confirm.
You know, so like I don't understand this idea of if we just like put a game in, I don't know, Las Vegas, like it's going to sell out and everyone's going to love rugby all of a sudden. It's like if it was that easy, there'd be American teams, and you know, all kinds of things going on. And as far as I'm aware, a lot of the teams in the American League end up going bust eventually. So, like, none of it makes any sense. And yeah, the only problem is if say like Jack Morgan did want to go, he came out with that like statement saying like, you know, I play for the Ospreys, I wouldn't want to leave in X, Y, and Z. That means that when his contract does wind down, like it's going to be very hard for him to leave if he decides that he wants to follow the money, doesn't it? It's an interesting conundrum for him. Not that I'm saying he would want to leave, but when you nail your colours to the mast like that, it does become a lot harder. So and considering he'd be the only player to go, I don't see it happening at all. No.
The people financing it, I think, are 885 Capital, and they're massive conglomerate based in the UAE. I don't think they're going to be struggling for money. And at the end of the day, they pump loads of money into things like the Ballers League and all these other sort of things that just don't feel right and somehow work. I can see it like going for 2 seasons, with a bunch of sort of B-list stars, but either players that are slightly past their peak or were big names. Someone I almost definitely see it joining this league is like Israel Folau. Just that sort of quality where they were a big name sort of 3-4 years ago, but aren't near international contention.
I tell you what, that would be a great pod. Names of players that you think would join.
I was tempted to introduce a game of can we name a full squad of players who think will actually join.
I think Marnonu would be a good shout. He's still going at it.
Marnonu is a superb shout.
I got to say, Liam Williams or more.
Yeah, he'd be another one. Yeah, hey, maybe Josh Adams.
No, I think Josh Adams wouldn't. I don't see him leaving Wales. I think he likes. Annoyingly, I think he likes Cardiff too much.
Max Lihif, maybe people like that.
Yeah, I could see Jimmy Gopperth coming back for one more season at 10.
It screams Angus O'Brien.
Do you reckon we get Jeff Hassler back and Tyler Ardron?
What would I do to get a prime Jeff Hassler back?
What I'd do to have Tyler Ardron in his current state, let alone prime. Let's save that for another time. Maybe a good piece of content for a rap pod one day. Maybe. Let's move on to the actual rugby that was played this weekend and talk about the thing we're here to talk about, the Ospreys. Just a little bit. At the weekend, we obviously lost 26-10 to Stormers away in Cape Town. Wasn't the best result, but it wasn't a particularly bad performance, would you say, gents?
It was honestly, I felt like it went similarly to the Bulls game. Came out the traps really well, scored some good points, got out wide, some really like flow-in moves. And then they got on top of us at scrum time. Gave away 3 penalties in quick succession just before the end of the first half and then into the second half. And then Stormers got ahead and it just never really looked like they were going to get back into the game. They looked at what was slightly worrying for me, other than the set piece, which again, scrums were shaky, is like Mark Jones highlighted it in his post-match press conference as well. They looked to run out of ideas and they were running into brick walls. and they weren't going anywhere, and then they'd cough up another penalty. And it just like that was slightly like concerning that in both games now towards the end of the matches, like we've dropped off. Energy levels seem to drop. We're not making the meters in contact that we were. So yeah, but I mean, without wanting to be like overly negative, I think we played some really good rugby in parts and did get go forward in the first half. In the first half, we were really, 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 really good. I thought Hugh Sutton was brilliant. Actually, 3 turnovers in the match, and he looked really, really good. Harry Deeves again, just like he's become one of those players that like you just expect to get an 8 out of 10 out of him now. Very similar feeling to like Jack Morgan, where it's just like he starts like a game, he makes like loads of tackles, gets involved in the breakdown, and yeah, just comes out an 8 out of 10 every time. But yeah, again, it was scrum time that did for us a bit. And then, but really, really good in defense as well. So all in all, I think it's been a pretty positive trip in South Africa, despite kind of all the, not negative, but work-ons, I guess, that I highlighted there. But yeah, don't know what you boys thought, but that was my take.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, especially the elephant in the room, unfortunately, is the scrums. I think without at least parity at scrum time, you can't be competitive. And there's, I think, Nick, you might have mentioned it on the Rap Pod, where it's a bit worrying because it probably was the Stormers and Bulls' second choice front row as well, because a lot of their players are missing South Africa, and you're sort of going, well, we've got no one to come back. This is it now. This is our first choice sort of front row. And I was looking at some of the stats, and I think we conceded 16 penalties, 10 of which were by our front row, and they were spread relatively equally. There's no one like specifically, we've got repeatedly pinged. It was 2 for Gareth Thomas, 2 for Dowie Lake, 2 for Cam Jones, 2 for Tom Bofa, 1 for Rhys Henry, he wasn't on that long, and 1 for Lewis Lloyd. So it's one of those. And I think it's really difficult to win a game when you don't have a competitive scrum. And I think we almost had, it kind of reminds me of the time before we had Tom Bofa. I think we went for a few years of not having a competitive scrum. And it gets to the point where you're almost gutted when the opposition knock the ball on, because you're like, well, they're probably going to win a scrum pen off the back of this, and they're probably going to kick 3 points, so we're going to be 40 metres down the field. So yeah, that's a big area of concern. And I think, we have got a lot of young front rowers in there in terms of, I was having a look at the age profile, because there's an element where you're like, oh, can we not just sign a Bulls or Stormers second or third choice tight head who's like in his late 20s, and we'll get another Tom Bofa. But then there's also an element where I know we have a lot of really talented props coming through, and I think Rhys Henry really could come through really strong. He has just come back from injury, so I think he will get better. Ben Warren's 25 now. He's been in and around the Wales camp. He's going to have a big future. And Garen Phillips and Cam Jones again on the loose head, really good props as well. So I think they will come through. And I think there's also an element where we probably played 2 of the strongest scrummaging sides in South Africa. So it's not going to be like this all season. I think there's, Zebra don't have as good a scrum.
They looked tidy on the weekend, worryingly.
They did, but I think they're going to be a banana skin. But I am confident that the scrum will improve on the weekends. And yes, the Stormers were missing their front rowers, but that was also the same Stormers front row who demolished the Leinster front row that had Jack Boyle and Slimani, who were 2 international props, and they demolished them. So, and Leinster aren't going to get demolished every week. So I don't think there's too much to be. Maybe I'm just being positive, but I think our scrum hopefully will get better. Work out.
I did think that sometimes the ref was a bit harsh on the scrum, and I know that sounds ridiculous, and you don't want to always say they got, but I do wonder how much when teams go out to South Africa, because they're known for the scrummaging and they're known for their set piece, how much that plays into like getting on the wrong side of the right side of the referees when you're out there. Because, before the game, we talk about, it's going to be set piece dominant. When South Africa play, it's set piece dominant. That is their bread and butter. I do wonder sometimes, like, watching those scrums, sometimes you get blown up, blown out the park, and that's fine. But sometimes like you're getting pinged for like stepping around, and I was like, I don't really see it like that, or I personally didn't see it sometimes. So I do wonder how much like influence that kind of like reputation has when teams go out there,
And I don't think it's just the refs, Jack. I agree with everything there. There was a pen right at the end when I think they'd actually, you could argue, taken our maul down. So they had the put in, and what should have been, a standard clearance. Okay, we go a game around their 22. Their tighter dived into Dewi, who's Lloyd Lewis on by then, but and took Cameron Jones down. It's not, the ref going to be in one side of the scrum, but the assistant ref should have blown that up. It was obviously a penalty to us. But as you say, I think they get a feeling who's on top in the game, and you can't argue the Stormers were on top in the scrum. But not every scrum is judged from a clean sort of fair point of view either.
Yeah, I think you're definitely on something there, and I think it was something Dan mentioned on the main rap pod as well with the Dragons, and Rob Hunt was quite harshly done by. I know this is an Ospreys pod, but I think it's a similar thing where if you have a perception going into the game, as you say, that the Stormers or the Bulls are going to be dominant, if it's a 50-50, you're likely to give it to the Stormers or the Bulls. But then I'm not a prop, so I don't know the intricacies, but it kind of felt like we were under pressure. And you can always tell sometimes by the prop's body language as he's conceded the penalty if he feels like he's harshly done by. And it just felt like they were like jogging back as if, yeah, fair enough. There's nothing I can do there. I was under pressure. And maybe I'm reading into that incorrectly, but I think Adam Jones speaks a lot about speaking to the officials and being really communicative and saying what he's feeling in the scrum and saying, oh, he's doing this or he's doing that, and finding the right time to mention it and almost playing mind games a little bit before the scrum and giving the ref things to look at and saying to the assistant on the far side, if he's on your side of the scrum, he's pulling my arm down here. Can you just keep an eye on it? And those little comms, that little bit of experience, I think can make a difference to those 50-50s, and it means the ref's already aware of it and it's playing on his mind. And we do have a young and inexperienced front row, so it maybe is something they can work on.
I think it's maybe a concerning point going forward that even though we've got in on paper quite a good front row, is it going to hold up throughout the season? Like, sure, Gara, Garton, Dilly, and Reece Henry or Tom both are very applicable, probably good URC level front row, scrummaging wise. Is good enough to be competitive, especially if they're the only one that is good. Per se.
There's been a lot of talk around the lack of like prep. I think Mark Jones has spoken about how they didn't have many friendlies before the season started as well, and how like the first choice kind of pack and so on have only had a certain amount of minutes together. I can't remember what it was. I think it was like 50 minutes or 60 minutes at the top of my head before these two games. I think it probably will get better the more that they like train together. I think they will get back and practice, and the more game time they have together, the better it'll be. Because it's not just in the scrums you notice in it. It's also around kind of things like mauls and so on, like particularly around like our own 22. So I think the more they play together and the more game time they have, the better it is going to be. But going out to South Africa, first two games, not much kind of like competitive rugby, not many pre-season friendlies, to play at altitude against the Bulls and the Stormers, who are two teams who are probably going to be pushing at the top of the table, maybe even top four. Like, you gotta ask yourself what you're expecting as well out of that. I know that sounds like defeatist, and it's never nice to sound defeatist, but I think given everything, we'll probably have a better idea of what the front row is going to be like and what the scrum's going to be like after the game coming up this weekend, than from those two games. So yeah, that would be my kind of take on it.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, Nick, you can go.
No, sorry, you make that point. I was going to move on about my point about the balance of the back row.
Okay, no, yeah, I was just saying one more thing on the pro. I just think one last thing I'll say is just on Nicky Smith. I think we obviously miss him on the field, but I think one thing we massively miss is potentially off the field, because when you're doing live scrums and training, and if you haven't had the match practice, scrummaging against someone like Nicky Smith and live scrums and training, I think would have really helped bring on the tight heads and make them very match ready in training. Because if you're not 100% and right in training, he probably would snap you in half in the scrum and really drive you back. Whereas, Gattom has probably come into training quite late, and he's a very solid scrummager, but probably isn't as destructive as someone like Nicky, where he would punish you if you got your technique wrong. And I just think, potentially by not having someone like that in the squad, competitive scrums and training potentially aren't very match realistic. Just on a side point. But yeah, it kind of goes back to something Rich Cockle used to say, where he said his most valuable player is his first choice tight head, second most valuable player is his second choice tight head. And I think that's something Toby really brought in when he came in. Was you had Tom Beaufort, you had Tom Francis, you had Nicky Smith, you had Gareth Thomas, we had 2 international front rows. And I understand we can't necessarily afford that, and you have to decide where you want to spend your money. But yeah, to not have a competitive scrum this season is going to absolutely kill us. So we do need to put it right.
On the positive side, I thought I really liked the back row that started. I thought Ratty brings the grunt and then line-out option. Moriarty has been very good in the line-out as well. And he was great taking the ball forward off a retreating scrum at times. And Deves was just Deves, wasn't he? But, that sort of the other end of the scrum does look really promising. And with Jack to return as well, I think, and Morgan Morris as well. We've got a lot of options in the back row of quality.
He made that break, didn't he, Moriarty, and he got ankle tapped just as he was getting into open field. It was I've never been so disappointed this year. Ankle tap in my entire life. I thought we were getting one of those highlight reels, kind of shows that we were all shown before he took the field. But yeah, I think he's been brilliant. And I know we were talking in the preseason pod about, do we think he's going to get a Wales call up or not, and is he going to be there? And the idea is he is going to be there, but given the way he's playing and how physically he is, and his line-out option, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he ended up getting a Wales call up in the autumn, particularly because he's been fantastic, I think.
Yeah.
Can I also give a shout out to Kieran Hardy? I thought was absolutely excellent. Kicked accurately, physical over the ball. Did he won at least 1 turnover, 2 turnovers, 2 tries? Fans of other Welsh clubs are giving him so much stick after the summer in Japan. Some of it was he didn't have his best games, but that was also to do with the management and leaving him on for bloody 80 minutes in the first match and all that heat.
Yeah.
So fair play to him to come back so strongly. I thought he was excellent.
He made the most dominant tackles out of anyone in our team.
That's a mad stat.
Yeah, I think I read that today. If I'm wrong, then come at me in the comments. But fairly sure that I read today when I was doing some research for this, he made the most dominant tackles. But yeah, so
I think he's such a nuts and bolts player. Like, his box kicking superb, his distribution's brilliant. He's quick around the base. He's in ridiculous shape, and he's very good close to the line. I think he's been brilliant for us. And I think, Nick, you kind of spot on there that the reason why he maybe dropped off towards the end of those games in Japan and people are giving him a hard time is because he was left on the field far too long in both games. Well, did he even come off any of the game? I don't think he came off.
No, he played under the 60 minutes.
That's stupid. For your 9, that is a ridiculous decision from Matt Sherratt. I'm sorry, but the amount of running a 9 has to do, and as you say, in that heat in Japan, to not expect a drop off is nuts. But I think it'll be very much high up in Tandy's pecking order. In addition to Ruben Morgan-Williams, who I thought was brilliant as an impact player coming on, I thought he really added a lot of pace. So I'm really happy with both 9s. I think they're both superb.
I think there's plenty to be positive out of this tour to South Africa, mainly with the fact that we don't have to go to South Africa for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
A couple of their tries were really lucky. You know, I'm not saying we deserved to win, but the first try when he kicked the across and Roos scored. Any other time, Keenan's done exactly what he should have done. He's shepherding it. It would 90%, perhaps 99% of the times that ball would have bounced in goal, and we'd have had 22 drop out. And it completely went the other way, which is rugby ball can do, of course. But
Shape of the ball.
but another day that wouldn't have been a try. And even the second try they scored, there was an element of luck to that. You know, Samani, I think his name was, he was very good. The centre kicked it through. You know, as I say, I'm not saying they went the better team because they came out second half. They'd had I think a rocket up their arse at half time, and they were far more physical. And I think that put a bit of pressure as well, that defensive pressure, while we weren't quite making the yards. And then once we weren't making the yards in contact, we didn't look so good. But I think, as everybody said, overall a decent tour.
Yeah. Well, we're above Leinster, and they have the same fixtures, and we know how good they are. So we're not going to judge them at their current point. Otherwise, we can judge Leinster at their current point, and they're the worst team in the league. So
actually, I think no, it's even better. Scarlets is currently bottom.
I was going to say, don't want to take it back to an Anglo-Welsh league, but I reckon if you ask Gareth Davis and the Scarlets boys if they'd rather be driving to Gloucester or flying to Dublin, they're going to tell you exactly what they think now. Timing of questions is very important. I think Leinster fans are saying that it's because all the Lions aren't playing and so on. It's like, you got 3 island squads in your team, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think just on a side note, I thought just calling out another couple of players thought were great. It's Dowie Lake. I think he's back to his best. I think he's so good at the moment.
Such a good start to the season. Like coming off the Japan tour, he was awesome, and he's just brought that form into winning one game with Wales into every game he wants to play for the Ospreys now. Just win it all. He looks so determined, just do it himself, and they do.
What are you thinking about his tash, though? Do you like Dowie's tash? Do you think this is something you lads want to consider?
Given the amount of hair on my head, I need to keep as much on my face as possible. It's like an apology. I've grown a beard as an apology for having no hair on my head. So
it's giving used car salesman, but it's also giving French theatre writer from the 1800s.
I'm thinking sheriff, and the way he's getting. I know you can't call him sheriff because someone else is the sheriff, obviously, but that is a sheriff tash.
No, he's been great.
Yeah, his work and turnovers and his work at the breakdown is fantastic. I think both games, he's getting in over the ball, and I mean, I do think that sometimes his throwing could still sometimes is a bit off, but I don't know if that's because we've lost, main kind of line-out targets as well. It's not always a thrower, so yeah. But in general, I think he's been absolutely fantastic.
I think Sean Hawley made an interesting point on that, where he sort of said, because of how much work he gets through around the field, you're coming off the back of making 15, 20 tackles a game, and then you're having to do something that's quite like a fine motor skill in terms of throwing in and hitting your darts. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I think there's, I'd probably need to look into it more, but there's probably a correlation between the hookers who are very good around the field, but less strong at line out time just because they're exhausted by the time they throw a line out. So I think there potentially is something in that, but yeah, he just offers. I think he's the best hooker in the world around the field. He's definitely in the top few. I think Malcolm Marks might have something to say about that, but yeah, I think he's superb. And there's always talk at the moment about Van der Merwe for Scarlets and all these different clubs being interested. But just remember, a couple of seasons ago, he was on loan to us and he couldn't get a game, and he couldn't get a game because he was behind Dowie Lake and Sam Parry at the time. So that just shows the real quality we've got.
Nala agrees.
Yeah,
She does.
Before we move on through for our community results and onto our preview of the Zebra game this weekend. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel or subscribe to the pod. We greatly appreciate everyone who's come in so far. We've recently hit 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we really appreciate all the help we've got and support we get. If you're enjoying it, please drop a like or rate it 5 stars. It means the world to us. Shall we move on to the community results? Grant isn't here this week. Nick, do you think you're going to be a suitable deputy?
I'll do my very, very best. Hard act to follow. Just to start off with Super Rugby Cymru, and a great win for Swansea. Beat top of the table Newport. Last year's league winners Newport. Great win up there in Dunvant, their new home for the season. And a really cracking game between our other two teams, Aberavon and Bridgend. I think Bridgend, after losing the first game last weekend, came out on top this time down in Aberavon. So, yeah, those are the results there. Going to Admiral Premiership, Llangennech playing Neath, and Neath won that. Championship East, Penalla against Bridgend Athletic. Great away win for Bridgend Athletic. Going on then to, what's that? Admiral Championship West, Tondy 39, Dunvant 24, Gorseinon 33, Newcastle Emlyn 24, Ammanford 30, Cefnig Hill 25, Tartar Steel and Jabanos, I think they probably fell foul of the weather. Glenneath 19, Bonamine 33, Gowerton 39 and Crumach 14. I think Neath, right, on to Division West. T. Croes lost at home to Pontedilais. Betus lost at home to Lucha. Penclawdd also lost at home to Nantgaredig. West Central, Neath Athletic beat Pencoed 38-17. Mumbles lost to Abraham and Quins at home. Bryn Cethyn lost at home to Birchgrove. Porthcawl lost at home to South Gower. And Morriston beat Brynhaman. And I think Neath Athletic move up to top place in their league. Ammon United lost at home heavily to New Dock Stars, and Ammon United are firmly at the bottom of League 3 West. Nantum Oil drew with Rigos. Bryn Coch 33, Cwmavon 21, Resolving 35, Maesteg Celtic 10, Baglan 27, Tom Mawr 13, Tonna 34, and Seven Sisters 15. West Central, Bonamine Athletic 34, Cranant 15, Cefn Cribwr 13, played out a draw against Maesteg. Pontedawe and Cwmgors must have fallen foul of the weather as well, as did Gleis against Penlan. Britain Ferry 24, Bridgend Sports 10, Brackler 21, and Isowen 36. And I think we're on to the last one now. League West Central, Cwmgrach 45, beating Glencorrwg 27. A massive big win for Cwmturch away at Pont Rhydyfen. Banwen 36, Taibach 21. Another game didn't get played. Dunvant Athletic against Cwm Llymnet. And then East Central, Cardiff Saracens 13, Kevin Coyd 24. East Central's 6, St Peter's Athletic 17, Tondy Athletic 17, Cefnig Hill 12, Beddau Athletic 60, and Bridgend Athletic 2nd 15, 30, Sully 13, and Kevin Coyd unbeaten and at the top of League 5 Central. So that's the end of the community results.
There's some superb games in there, to be fair. I think Swansea had a really good start to the SLC season. Worth giving them a watch. Lots of Johan Cornelius, Lewis Edwards have looked really good so far. Playing so far. Good experience for young boys, and hopefully they continue on. I think the SLC pod is recording tonight, and I'd suggest giving them a listen if you want to hear more about them. let's move on then to the final part of this pod. Zebra, our first home win of the season. I think it's best if we talk about it quite adequately. You boys confident? Zebra obviously 2-0 so far this season. 2 wins against Edinburgh and Lions on the weekend. They're looking okay. Are they going to be the walkover? I say walkover. It's not like we've walked them over in a while, but the walkover that they've classically been. Josh?
I don't think they've been a walkover for a while. I think they'll give us a game. I think the Ospreys will win. As I said, like, I think it'll be a test of our set piece, because watching them on the weekend, they had a decent scrum, scored a few pushover, scored a couple of tries from mauls as well, and they play some good rugby. To be fair to them, they play some really good rugby. I don't know if anyone can answer this, but they've got a player Josion. I'm wondering if that is Yannick Josion's son playing for Zebra. I didn't have a chance to check, but I'm wondering if anyone knows off the top of their head if there is any relation.
I could not tell you.
But yeah, I think it'll be really nice to get down to the Brewery field. First home match of the season. And I fully expect the Ospreys to win, but I don't expect it to be easy. I don't think that Edinburgh are going to have a particularly good season. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see them having a particularly good season. So I don't think they've played the strongest opposition yet, Zebra, and they managed to scrape through in the final minutes of the game on the weekend. And so I think the Ospreys should have enough to beat them, and I'm thoroughly looking forward to watching it.
I think it almost feels like we've had 2 really tough preseason games against South African sides, and this is the first real test of where we're at this weekend. As you say, like they're 2 from 2, but they've probably played some of the easier teams in the league. And just looking at the stats, it kind of feels like they've done well to win those games. Like the stats were definitely leaning in the other team's favour from what I've seen. Just to pick out a couple of things I spotted is just their 7. For a start, he's got a great name, Batistuta Bravin. He's one of the top carriers in the league, so he's had a really, really good couple of weeks. And they also like to play off their 10 a lot, but that also leaves a tendency for him to get isolated. And I think their 10 is one of the most penalised players in the league. So if we can get after him with Deves, if Jack Morgan's back, not sure. But yeah, if we can get after him with our back rowers, potentially there's opportunities there for turns and turnovers. I'm sure Mark Jones will be, on that. But yeah, I'm really excited for the weekend, to be fair. I think while we've been recording, Lance has put out a tweet to say, we've had some fun in the office today. I can't tell you about it, but if you're at the game on Saturday, you'll know exactly what we've been doing. #shithousery. So yeah, I'm interested to know what that specifically could be. And is there a live zebra currently in Bridgend that they're going to bring out?
Walking around the ground.
Yeah. I know a couple, maybe a month ago, Lance was talking about shit that you can play over the PA. I think he was at Plymouth Albion or something, where after they carded the player, they played all by myself, all on the PA as he walked off, which is superb. So I'm hoping that it's going to be something of that ilk. I can only imagine. Nick, you'll have to keep us informed in real time.
I will do, I promise.
I think it's important to say that as well, because if we don't, Grant will go after us all in the WhatsApp group. The Osprey Supporters Club are meeting at the Riverside Tavern outside the ground. So you can go in there for a cheap pint. We discussed the prices on last week's pod. So if you would like to know how much a pint of Madry costs, before you turn up, you can listen to that pod. Obviously, if you're not a drinker, I'm sure there's an assortment of soft drinks, because yeah, I am obviously off the drink and would be 100% drinking Diet Coke of some sort. So yeah, get to the Riverside Tavern before the game. and after, if you because the clubhouse sadly is being used for hospitality, I believe, purposes, or players guests. So, yeah.
Would you guys make any changes, to the team? Obviously, I think the Ospreys have let out some pictures today, one of which interestingly showed Ryan Smith up in the line-out. So would you freshen it up? We've talked about Dewi. Dewi's had a really hard couple of games, or is this a too important game to leave him out? And I suppose it depends as well. Is Jack fit enough to play?
Because I'd certainly give some of the boys, especially some of the new boys, a bit of a run out. If Jack's fit, I'd give him the start. Just give him a captaincy. Captain Jack back for first game home feels nice. And then is there a chance to give the new boys a run out of Brewery Field? I think Moriarty will probably keep his place. He's been awesome and is someone who's going to fill seats. Ryan Smith, I think, if he's been training, I imagine he'll start. And I imagine we'll go for quite a big sort of back five in that case. Sort of a James Ratty at 6. Jack at 7, give Deavesy a break because he's made 43 tackles in 2 games in South Africa.
Yeah.
Utterly mental.
Yeah.
I wouldn't look to change too much, because the worry is if you change too much, there's not that cohesion there. And as we spoke about before, they didn't have much time pre-season in terms of matches. And if I don't want to be like the speller of doom, but if they do lose to Zebra and it's 3 in a row lost, that could be quite problematic. Actually, it could go from being quite positive about the performances out in South Africa to losing to Zebra to being 3 on the bounce, and then you're kind of looking at the games coming up after that aren't easy. So it is important to get a win, and I wouldn't underestimate the Zebra side. So with that in mind, I wouldn't look to change massive amounts, because you want a side that is kind of match prepared and has been through these games. So yeah, I would look to keep it pretty similar, if not the same, to be honest.
I think I'm leaning more towards that as well. I think potentially you could use players like Ryan Smith and Jack Morgan to really bolster up that 40 to 60 period. So let's, potentially put them on the bench. And then you've got that experience and that boost coming on in that period where we've seemed to lull a little bit in the first couple of games. Deavesy, I'm conscious he has made a hell of a lot of tackles and he's been superb. But he also comes across a little bit like one of those players who just needs to back up games and just keep him ticking over, keep him going. Because I think if you were to tell him, look, we're going to give you a week off this week and play Jack, I think he'd be gutted. I think he'd be really gutted because I think he's deserved to keep hold of that 7 shirt, and Jack can come off the bench and hopefully make an impact. I maybe would put Lake on the bench, would be my only other change potentially, and start Lewis Lloyd. And that's simply just, we can bring Lake on at 50 and again, just look to bring on experience. And if you're offloading a bench of, Lake, Garen Phillips, Reece Henry, Ryan Smith, Jack Morgan, Ruben Morgan-Williams, you're adding energy. You're adding serious energy, serious firepower. But we've got so much back row riches, because then what you do with Morgan Morse. So it's a good problem to have, I guess. But yeah, I'd still stick with Gatom, Tom, both similar second row partnership. I'd keep Moriarty in there. I'd keep Deaves in there, potentially. Keep Ratty at 6. So I'd keep a lot of the spine of the team the same, but I would make a couple of changes to either give boys a rest, like Dowie, who's more injury prone, and add more experience later on in the game.
Good point. Yeah.
I'll be inclined the same way. I want to see the new boys, naturally.
Yeah.
I do think we'll keep the backline the same. It was the starting backline was awesome out in South Africa. Phil Cockner-Singer was once again great on the weekends. I think we're just going to bolster the bench, because I think that's where we faltered a lot naturally. And with the bolstering of the bench, I don't see it going wrong particularly. Especially when if it is going wrong, you sort of have revert back to Type A and just bring on Jack Morgan, Wales captain, Lion, Ryan Smith, Australian international, Derry Lake, Wales captain, just to come on and smash into people.
I can't believe you've gone the whole pod without mentioning Dan Casende.
Yeah,
Oh,
I started to feel bad there. I was thinking of the team and I was like, we haven't even mentioned him. Just doing
it's
shuttle runs up and down to get that, getting underneath high balls. What a player. What a player.
that's such a good point. Yeah, I had it on my notes, but I must have skipped over it. But honestly, yeah, the South African commentators absolutely loved him as well, and
Yeah.
quite rightly. He was unbelievable. I thought he's been superb, amazing in the air, amazing carrying, just faultless. I can't say enough good things about him. Love him.
He's
Well, we loved him. We loved him already, didn't we? And
Yeah.
now he's had a full pre-season with us.
Yeah.
You know, if he can stay fit, he's such a great signing.
Surely he's eating a Welsh cake or been to Nice. We can get him in there, you know, like back in the Graham Henry days. Like,
Yeah.
I know someone who might pose as his grandmother for a photo shoot.
I'm pretty sure he had the same grandmother as Shane Howarth, I think. So
yeah.
I was going to say, let's put some numbers on this. Two predictions from each of you, scoreline, and something funny that's going to happen. Jack, do you want to lead us off?
Yeah, Ospreys by a score, so 7. Ospreys by 7, I would say. Something funny that'll happen. I'm trying to think here. Like I do like the idea that Lance Bradley is going to enter the stadium riding some kind of animal now. I'm not sure what the possibility that is, but hey, you know, in a world where we have to boost like promotion of the league and so on, that's definitely going to get some views. So let's get him on the back of a zebra or something. Sorry, Josh, I've stolen yours there, but absolutely all for it. Like the early days of the Premier League when they were just doing everything at halftime.
100%. Yeah, I think I'll say Ospreys by 15, and I'll go along the same lines as Jack. I don't know if any of you've seen Semi-Pro, where Will Ferrell is like a basketball team in America, and he's like plays and he promotes. And before the game, he's like, "Right, I'm going to fight a bear. Turn up, everyone, turn up. I'm going to fight a bear in a cage." And so I'm going to go along the same sort of lines. I think they brought a bear into Bridgend. They're going to get a cage out, and Lance Bradley is going to be fighting a bear. So get yourselves to Bridgend to watch Lance Bradley fight a bear this Saturday.
I'd buy a ticket to that. Nick?
I'm going Ospreys by 11 and a bonus point. I think it'll be a really good game. I think it'll be a few tries either side, 5-3, some Martin tries. Zebra will come and play. The weather forecast is great, and yeah, get yourself down there and watch the game if you're in the area. And my funny thing is, despite being unfit for the team tonight, Grant will make a good recovery from his lurgy. And well done, as you've mentioned, the Riverside Tavern. He'll be playing a post-match gig in the tavern with his band. And as well as being on lead guitar, he's going to take up the lead vocals. And he's going to be likened to Bonnie Tyler in a prime circa in 1977. And I know you lads are too young to remember that, but you might have seen clips on YouTube or something. But I'm sure Grant would appreciate that funny part from me.
That would be quite funny. I'm going to think the brand off. It's not mine, isn't as funny. I'm sorry. I think the Ospreys are going to be pretty comfortable. I think Ospreys by 13 sounds about right. Well, I think Danny Eds is going to kick a drop goal that lands in the Tesco car park next door. It just feels right. Just feels right. And I'll keep saying it until it happens someday this season. And I think with that, I think that's it for the pod tonight, gents. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you're attending the game, please feel free to pop into a Riverside. There'll be plenty of boozing and non-boozing if you're a Puritan like Jack. And I hope everyone has a great time this weekend. Let's look forward to the game. Ta-da.
Ta-da.